to the news from Syria. So basically, they've struck a deal, Russia and the Syrian regime, the United States. Syria has agreed to sign a chemical weapons convention, and it's also agreed to give up its chemical weapons stockpiles sometime in 2014. Uh, you know, I think there are a couple of takeaways here. One is I think the Obama administration does deserve some credit for allowing a diplomatic path to emerge. And also, I know there's many conflicting interpretations of John Kerry's comment where he sort of floated this publicly. Some people thought it was just a kind of. I know the Daily Show did a really funny rundown that it was like a Dr. Magoo moment. I know that or Captain Magoo, excuse me, that
Mr. Magoo?
Mr. Magoo.
Yes.
I don't even know what that reference.
It's I'll explain to you later.
Explain it to me later. I was homeschooled, folks. I'm sorry. But other people have said, and I think Sam was hinting at, in some respects, even with Kerry and his kind of mishaps, sometimes he is a smart guy. It seems kind of unlikely that would completely emerge from nowhere, especially given how quickly the Russians were able to seize on it. Now, Assad is still basically threatening. There's questions around implementation of that because he wants us to stop funding the rebels, which we're not going to do. And frankly, I don't think we necessarily should do. I think we should be providing some help to some of the rebels. That's my personal view, and certainly doing more to deal with the refugee crisis. But we'll see how that plays out. But I think that there's a couple of kind of contextualizing things to look at that. The deal through. One is that the reality that we are living in a more multilateral world. And whether or not it's Russia, I think Russia obviously has its own. Assad is that's its client regime, that's its interest in Syria. There's a lot of client-state relationships in Syria, and a lot of different interests being expressed through that. Russia is Assad's prime backer. Russia also has its own. I guess some legitimate strategic concerns, but also incredibly, deeply problematic human rights record with Muslims, with what they've done in Chechnya. They perceive Syria probably through those lenses. But it's definitely a victory for them diplomatically, and I agree with President Obama. So what? Fine. Let it be a diplomatic victory for whoever if it achieves the objective. And it's also a victory, though, broadly for countries that are different than Russia. I would say I would make a distinction. The BRIC countries, countries like Brazil, countries like South Africa, and China were involved to a degree because they, for a variety of different reasons, want to see more deal making like this happen, and they want to live in a world, frankly, of deal making. And it sounds kind of obvious, and it sounds something like we all sort of pay lip service to. But I think that there's a convergence here of the kind of exhaustion of U.S. capacity, both in terms of at home and exhaustion with endless military engagement and intervention, and globally with the kind of coalitions coming together to facilitate this type of deal making. Now, I don't think that this doesn't address the human rights crisis in Syria. This doesn't address the civil war. And frankly, it may not even address fully the chemical weapons question, because one of the reasons Assad has used chemical weapons is because he's representing, his forces have only been able to keep up with the rebels through these kind of massive, shocking uses of force, not just chemical weapons, but also carpet bombing and really brutal campaigns which specifically punish civilians in cities and in areas where rebels have taken over. The other thing that really briefly, Parag Khanna, who's a foreign policy analyst and geostrategist, and wrote a piece recently talking about how the real way to look at what's happening in the Middle East is that you have these kind of three players moving for dominance in that region. So right now you have, on one hand, in Turkey, you have the Justice and Development Party, which is a more centrist Islamic party, but it tends to be aligned with Muslim Brotherhood politics and with its a certain flavor of Islamic democracy. They've been incredibly supportive of the rebels in Syria. They were supportive of the Morsi government, and they want to project a Turkish influence and their specific flavor through the region, and it's a different type of Turkish influence. The previous regime had been obviously much more secular. The Gulf states and the Saudis are supporting not Islamist movements so much. They're supporting some Islamist movements in Syria, but in other places, like in Egypt, they're backing the military coup. They want stability. They want the old line alliances to work. And Iran is filtering the situation through Shiite identity and nationalism, and that's why they're in Bahrain, which is another area. Bahrain is a Sunni monarchy that has a very large Shia population that are oppressed. So the Saudis sent in troops to back the monarchy in their crackdown, and the Iranians support the human rights movement in Bahrain, whereas in Syria, the Iranians have backed Assad. Assad's not Shia, but Assad is Alawite, and they're more closely aligned with the Shias. And of course, Syria is a transport route for Iran to get weapons and other resources into Hezbollah. So there's just a lot of moving pieces. And I think that one of the lessons that we need to keep drawing is, in the 1970s, when Jerry Brown was the governor of California the first time, he talked about living in an era of limits. And I think we need to start thinking about foreign policy somewhat in those terms. Where can we really intervene to help actual people, to deal with actual humanitarian crisis? And then, think more broadly about finding solutions to these problems. But that's where things stand now. The process is going to go through the UN, and obviously the administration is still holding out the threat of military force. So that's where things stand.
It's a tenuous situation. I mean, I don't know how else to describe it.
Yeah, it's a very tenuous
it really
situation.
It's difficult, and it's not as cut and dry, black and white as people would like it to be.
There's all of these things. There's the issue of borders. There's the issue of, we've highlighted all of these issues. I think it's interesting to look at the Syrian anarchists, which I've talked about before. I think it's important to look at the Kurdish population in all of these places. There's just a lot of variables, and that's kind of the thing that I think it sounds so obvious, but as as citizens who care about this stuff, and as people, and sounds a little new agey, but just as sharing humanity, sharing this planet, right? And then also as policymakers and journalists and whatever, you really got to. It's almost like we need to all start thinking more like anthropologists or something. Like we just need to start figuring out, like, who are people? How are they living? What are their communities? What are their values? How do they look at the world? And we want to look at all these places and have one map and one simple story that kind of filters everything. And it's almost never the case, and then it leads to, in the worst case, a disaster like Iraq. But and then obviously there's all the other factors of pipeline politics and oil and climate change. You just keep kind of like loading the factors in, and it gets more and more complex. But that's how it is. That's what it is.